That was a soft ow. Okay. That's not what my kids do. But I pitch and they go, ow! We were created with pain receptors. Hers doesn't work very well. And tear ducts. Why? Why are we created with pain receptors and tear ducts? Do you think God is going to use them? Or are they going to sit dormant? Phil Yancey wrote a book called Where is God When It Hurts? He explained medically what happens when we get cut or banged up. He also explains what happens when we don't have sensitivity to pain. And that was a reality check actually for me when I read that. Because we can really seriously hurt ourselves if we don't feel pain. Imagine putting your hand on something really, really hot and you don't feel pain, and all of a sudden you smell something burning, and you look at your hand and it's already 3rd degree. Well, if you don't have sensitivity to pain, that's what happens. So, sensitivity to pain is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. It's just a light pain when you feel pain because you'll take that hand off right away. But if you didn't have that sensitivity, then your hand could be lost. Imagine not feeling a mosquito bite. They will chew you up. You wouldn't know it. My mom was collecting mussels when we were in the ocean, the beach, and this was the summertime, so there are mosquitoes everywhere. But she wanted to ignore them because she was so caught up in getting the mussels because she could taste it. And she collected so many that we had a feast. But she was itching all over the place. And when she took off her shirt and we saw her back, it was like poison ivy times 100. Maybe sumac, if you've ever seen poison sumac. I mean, bumps everywhere on her back. And I was wondering, Mom, how could you stand all of that? They were biting you and biting you and biting you, and you kept ignoring it just because you wanted the mussels. How? She had to ignore the pain just because of the light of the mussels on her taste buds. She ignored the pain, even though it was there. To ignore the pain is one thing. Not having pain is another thing. What is the difference between pain and no pain? Because it's a degree. See, if we grab ourselves like this, and grab yourself like this, there's no pain. Okay? But if you pinch yourself, of course, there's pain. What is that? Well, you can grab this way or you can grab this way. If you pinch, you get hurt. If you grab this way, you don't. So it's a matter of degree. Our body is designed to let us know when we are going to cause it damage. If our bodies are going to be hurt, our bodies are supposed to let us know. And it will let you know after it got hurt. Two years ago, my son, Simeon, he's going to be 18 in a month. He and I experienced something that we've never experienced before. Every Thursday night, we get together as fathers and sons to encourage one another and grow together as men. And during that time, we interact, play games, study, get teaching, and while we were playing, we were playing a game called Steal the Bacon. And the way that that's played is something is in the middle, whether it is a ball or a flag, and the two teams are lined on the opposite walls. Everybody has his own number, and when the master of the game calls a number, those two numbers corresponding run up to the whatever the object is, grab it and take it back. And if you get caught, then the point is for the other team. If you don't get caught, the point is yours. But this particular game was done with a basketball. So when the names are called, they run to the ball, grab the ball. The first person who grabs the ball tries to score on the opposite goal. Well, in this particular case, the master of the game called two numbers. And instead of leaving the ball on the floor, he threw it up in the air. And my son and Jason went after the ball, jumped up in the air, flashed up in the air, and my son landed on his back and subsequently hit his head on the floor. Immediately, his limbs went up in the air while he was on his back. His eyes rolled back, he was shaking, he was having a seizure. I looked at that and I said, I'm going to lose my son. And I grabbed him and I prayed for him. I was desperate. I told him, I'm here, and screamed to people, call the ambulance. And then had other adults and team members come and pray for him. And I couldn't stand the emotions of it. Here I was staring at the possibility that I was going to lose my son. It was horrible to experience the possibility. And when the ambulance showed up and casually came over to take care of my boy, I was frustrated at them too, because they weren't giving my son the attention and the emergency speed that they should have. My relief started when he started talking while we were inside the ambulance. He came to and he started complaining about all of these things that they jabbed into him, wrapped him with, and he said, get off me. But I don't think he knew what he was talking about. We got to the hospital, he had an MRI, he had a cracked skull, he had bleeding. And it was a miracle because he started healing immediately. The next day when they took the CAT scan, he was better and already healing, and the bleeding had already stopped, and he was healing with that too. I mean, I had everybody and his uncle and 3 churches praying for him. But I had to go through that pain, and I'm going, I know about pain, I know about this mentality, this principle, but why does it have to happen to me? Why do I have to go through the experience of seeing my son in a situation that I would never wish anybody to experience? His body was letting him know that there was something wrong, and it was a reaction to the trauma of a cracked skull that his body was saying, something wrong, we need to deal with this. Help him. His body was saying, help me, when he was in seizure. If he didn't go through that, and we didn't think it was an emergency, he would have just gotten back up, continued, blended that, had a clot, and went into perhaps a coma and death. But thank God that he went through the pain to tell us, and his body went through the pain to tell me and everybody else that he needed help. What is death? Death is separation. So if we think about death, don't think about it as the ceasing of life per se. Think of it as separation. Because Adam and Eve were separated from God when they sinned. So we have to go back to God's statement. On the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Did they die physically? No. Were they separated from God? Yes. Why does death hurt? Death hurts because it's a separation of relationships. If I lose any member of my family, it's a separation of a relationship, and that's why it hurts. We value relationships. What is a lie? It is the opposite of truth, of course. And what do we value? We value truth. We devalue lying. There are two kinds of pain: physical pain and emotional pain. Physical pain is signaled with pain receptors, but emotional pain is a pain of value. It's an expression of a loss of value. We go through emotional pain when we lose somebody because we value the person. Now, does God really care if we experience pain? This is the billion-dollar question in everybody's mind. Everybody wants to know, does God care if we actually experience pain? And why in the world would he allow pain in the first place? What I want to do this morning is to express to you, through God's own word, whether he cares or not. But you're going to learn something. You're going to learn something that God is doing. And I'm going to relate that to us. Does God really care about our pain? If we are going through a divorce, does he care? If people are going through a divorce, does he care? If we are being harassed at work, whether it be by peers or by our boss, does he care? If you're getting bullied at school, does he care? Does he care when somebody is being tragically abused, physically, in any other form, by even a relative or a family member? Does he care if your dad commits adultery? I mean, I have heard stories because I was in youth ministry. And I heard stories because people share with me because I do counseling. I mean, imagine personally finding out that you have a father who was unfaithful to your mother because you played hooky and you came home. And while you were home, your dad came home with another woman thinking nobody was home. Does God care? Does he care if your sibling or a family member has a debilitating disease like cerebral palsy, or has contracted HIV, or has lost, or your family member has lost your job, or lost a job or a business? Does he care about our suffering, our depression, our anxiety? Does he care? Do you think he cares? And let's say we have the question, answered for us that he actually does. It's more important for us, less important for us whether he cares or not. We want to know if he's going to do something about it. Well, here are the answers to those questions. Found in Exodus chapter 3. And the answer to both questions is yes. Okay? So let's read Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 through 10. Now this is Yahweh, the great I Am, talking to Moses. And this is what he declares. He says, the Lord said, Yahweh said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And one pastor said, mosquito bites. And the men in tights. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are opposing them, or oppressing them. So now, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Here, God declares that he has seen, he has heard, and he has concerned. He is concerned about them. Seen, heard, and concerned. In his mind, in his ears, and in his eyes. He responds with his sight, he responds with his hearing, and he responds with his understanding. And he says, I care about them. I care about their suffering. In chapter 2, I'm going to read this for you because it's connected. Chapter 2, in verses 23 to 25, he says, during that long period the king of Egypt died, the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. So God was concerned about the Israelites. So verse 8, he's going to do something about it. He says, now is the time to rescue the Israelites. Bring them relief and bring them bounty. A land flowing with milk and honey. What an expression. And he says, plenty of space and plenty of food. That sounds remarkable compared to what they had. But here's the frustrating thing about it. And this is where we begin to learn about what God is really doing. Because it's ridiculous. Right? You and I would stand up there and go, yeah, a little too late. They're taking 80 years. I mean, from the time that Moses was born to the message that he's getting right now, he's 80 years old. Moses is 80 years old. So while Moses is growing up, becoming a man, becoming a shepherd in the desert, turning 80, all the Israelites are still suffering. They're still in slavery. They're still being oppressed. So if he really cared, then why didn't he speed that up? Why couldn't Moses just lead him when he was 40 years old, or 30 years old, or 25 years old, or 7 years old? Why did he wait 80 years? Why is God taking 80 years to bring relief? And you thought that was bad? Well, it's been 400 years since slavery began. Do you think we had a nasty history of slavery in the United States? It was worse for the Israelites. Ours was a 400-year or theirs was a 400-year enslavement, and ours was, comparatively speaking, very, very short. So the Israelites had a lot to complain about, and Moses should have had a lot to complain about when God finally came and said, yeah, I care about your suffering. I heard your people. I'm concerned. Moses would have, I mean, if I were Moses, if you were there and God was talking to you, I mean, the first question you would ask would be, well, God, why did it take so long? Why? Why is it taking so long for you to rescue my people? What's more, okay, we're going to go backwards, okay, from the concern to why did he take so long? That's one perspective. To Genesis chapter 15. This is going to mess with your mind. And it should. It should mess with your mind, because this is what it says in chapter 15, verses 13 through 14 in Genesis. Let me read it for you. Mark it off and go check it yourself. Then the Lord said to him, this is now Yahweh talking to Abraham. He says, then the Lord, then Yahweh said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. Now this was a promise. Now, was this a prediction or a prescription? Was God saying, I predict that this is what's going to happen, or was he saying, I am prescribing that this happen? Now be very, very careful, because if you put God in a box and say he's only predicting, what you're saying is he is handcuffed to humanity. And whatever humanity does, he's going to respond to it. You know, he could make it better or make it worse, you know, whatever, but he's responding to people. No. No. That's not what God is saying. He's saying, I am going to make them slaves for 400 years. And you go, God doesn't do that. God doesn't make somebody a slave and make somebody free and make somebody a king and make somebody a female, make somebody tall, make somebody small, make somebody with cancer, and make somebody with, you know, genius, 200 IQ. God doesn't do that, does he? Now you think about that. Who created you? Who created you male? Who created you female? Did you decide that? Did you decide how tall you were going to be? Or did you decide when you were going to be born? Did you decide your nationality? Did you decide your parents? You didn't decide any of that. Did you decide to even be created? Who's in charge? So he says, the Israelites, your people, Abraham, your descendants, your children, and your children's children are going to be enslaved 400 years. He should have said, God, stop. I don't have any kids yet. You mean, when you bless me with a child, my children are going to feel these things? They're going to experience these things? Let me think about that for a second. Let me think about that for a day or two or three or four. Okay. Because I don't want my kids to suffer, God. So I'm gonna decide whether you should give me children or not. I'm going to decide whether you should give me a son or not. Because you're telling me that for 400 years, my posterity are going to suffer. Abraham should have put a stop to that. Whoa! That doesn't sound good for my kids. Honey, Sarah, God says our kids are going to suffer 400 years of slavery. So, you and I are not even going to give him the possibility of giving us children. We are going to abstain. You and I? Nope, we're going to keep about 5 feet away from each other for life. And then when we die, of course we're not going to have any kids, and our kids are not going to suffer. Did Abraham hear that? That his children are going to suffer? Yes. Did he still want the child? What is he, a fool? Look. See, because yes, they're going to suffer for 400 years. But in verse 14 it says, "But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions." So there are 400 years of suffering, and then there's blessing after that. So what do you want? You want to avoid the pain so you can have the blessing, or do you want to go through the pain so you can have the blessing? If God were just interested in relieving suffering, then his rescue approach is really flawed, isn't it? I mean, you said, "Oh, I'm concerned about your suffering." And we said, "Hogwash." We don't believe you. Exodus 5:21. And they said, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Why? Because they said, "Okay, you guys are calling out to God and saying you're suffering and you want relief. You guys are lazy. No more straw for you to make bricks. We're not going to give you any straw. You're going to have to get the straw yourselves." They were provided straw before, but now they're not going to be provided straw anymore, which means they have to do twice the work. They have to go out and scatter for straw, and they still have to make the same quota of bricks every day. This is right after Moses approached Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." So then the people are complaining to Moses, "You won't, idiot. Why'd you even approach Pharaoh in the first place? And you are helping us out? This is not helping. We're suffering even more because of you." So God's approach to relieving pain is flawed. He's sending Moses and irritating Pharaoh so that Pharaoh will make the suffering even more. God claims that he's concerned. And he said he wants to relieve suffering. So, if he doesn't do it quickly, if at times he makes it worse, and if it takes so long, then what's going on? So, we have to understand. We have to understand God in order to understand where suffering fits in our lives. Because if you understand it, then you will respond properly to it. But if you don't understand it, you're just going to complain. That's it. You'll just be a whining, complaining Christian all your life. What a terrible existence. So here, let's put this into perspective. God is powerful enough to stop it. God is powerful enough to not have started it in the first place. The fact that he doesn't, the fact that he started the pain and he doesn't stop it at our schedule means that there's something greater. There's a bigger purpose than you understand, than I understand. He could have prevented Adam from